Welcome back to the Corner of Story and Game, where we dive into the art of storytelling within game universes. I'm your host, Gerald Ford, and today we're once again exploring the dynamic world of transmedia storytelling, how expansive narratives traverse beyond games into novels, comics, and more, enriching the tapestries of the universes we love. Joining me today is a luminary in this field, Christie Golden, with an amazing career spanning many novels set in some of the most iconic universes like World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Star Wars, and Assassin's Creed. Christie has masterfully expanded game narratives into compelling literary works. So let's get into it. Christie, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Like we were saying ahead of time, it's been taking us a little time to put this together. There's been some back and forth, but it's been a crazy couple of years, and I very much appreciate you making the time for me.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Before we dig into the topic of the day, and the topic of the day is transmedia storytelling, which I've hashed over with others, but I want to speak specifically with you about bridging the gap into novels and such, because you're so well known for your work on the novels. But before we dig into that, every storyteller has a story of their own. Can you share with us how you fell in love with writing, your journey into game writing and writing novels and all of the wonderful things, and kind of where you're at today? Just take us on the ride.
Well, as they say, the twig was bent early. I just love stories. And when I was in first grade, I don't know if they still have it, but they used to have this off-white heavy construction paper that you would draw and cut up and do whatever with. And I'd fold it in half. I'd get lots of pages and staple them. And I'd write a story and illustrate it. And I would write a book. And I would give it to my teacher or, my mom or dad or whatever. And, so I just always did that. I was blessed with some fantastic English teachers, who were not, no, you have to do everything that the other kids are doing. It's like, can I try this instead? And they're like, go for it. And so that gave me a lot of confidence, and faith in myself, which one needs if one is to become a professional. And I certainly got plenty of that because I had this book that I'd been writing since 7th grade, basically. And after college, I finished it. And back in the day, this was the Pony Express era, basically. But you had to print out your manuscript and you had to mail it and you had to include return addressed envelope and you had to wait for 6 months to a year before hearing back from an editor. And they didn't want you to simultaneously submit. So, shopping that baby out again and again and again. I started getting the rejection letters. And that sounds like an oxymoron, but it's, I have one somewhere. I kept them all because you should. But it was on mimeograph paper, which was crazy. And Google it, youngsters. But, and it was Dear Author. Thank you for submitting, blah, blah, blah. And, some of them weren't even signed. And they just but I started getting the good ones, which were like, Dear Christie. And they were saying, this isn't working for us right now, or it's not, whatever kind letdown, but send us due next. And hereby hangs a cautionary tale, because I did not send them my next, because I was convinced that this was it. I had 12 books planned in this series, man. I had this one in this era of the world, and this one, blah, blah, blah. And this was their descendants. But no. I'll find a place where it's right. Well, while I was still doing that, I was also working for a magazine, and I was sent to, I can't remember it now, but there's a book festival. It was held at the Javits Center. It was various publications and stuff. And I was sent there. And of course, I'm there to work for my magazine, but since I'm there, I'm toting my manuscript along. Cautionary tale number 2, don't bring your manuscript with you. Nobody does that anymore because we don't print it out. But I did because I just didn't know any better. There was nothing available to tell you how to break into writing. Nothing. You just kind of winged it. This was the late 80s. Even conventions were really only starting to get traction. And I met an editor there who, Owen Locke, who's still with us as far as I know. And he was slow at his publishing house, and he sat down with me. And he just said, don't do this, in a very gentle way. He's like, this isn't a good idea because think about all the things that we have to take home with us. And I'm like, oh, right. That makes sense. And he just kind of gave me these tips just for nothing. And I was just like, this is amazing. This is amazing. Thank you so much. And, I still remember his name to this day. And so during that kind of thing, I got on an audition list for a company known as TSR that was doing Dungeons and Dragons dolls. And which were, of course, satanic. That was the big satanic panic. About it. I was learning it right at that time, and so they were auditions, and they wanted the first chapter and an outline, and they had this idea, and here are the characters we want to use. It's set in this world, blah blah blah, and I sent it in, and I got rejected. And somewhere along in there, I was working for a magazine, and the one that I worked with under the umbrella company was for video reviews. And they decided to get out of video reviews. And so I was laid off. And along about that time, here comes another audition to apply for. And it's for a place called Ravenloft. And it is a realm of fantasy and horror. And I'm like, I love horror. I love fantasy. This sounds like fun. And they have a character called Strahd von Zarovich. And they wanted to do a sort of prequel to what the player would get to experience when he was a very young vampire. And they wanted an older vampire from Faerun to come and teach him the ropes. Basically, it was an interview with the vampire. That's the sort of thing that they wanted because that was hot back then. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, so who is this? And it was up to me to develop the other character. They had Strahd, they wanted this other character. And so I'm like, all right, we got horror covered, we got vampires. What's the number one type of populace in fantasy fiction, right? Elves. I'll make an elven vampire. And I wrote a chapter, I wrote an outline, and it was a blind submission, and I was picked. And they said, congratulations, you have 3 months. Go. And of course, before I got that letter, I'd gotten hired. So I was working a full-time job and writing this book. And remember, the other one took me years and years and years to do. Quick segue back to that. I'm so glad it never got published. I was so glad. There's a term in writing, it's called the trunk novel. I don't know if people even use it anymore. But it's so apt. And the idea is that you hide it in the trunk. But it was really funny. Some years later, I looked back at that and I was like, oh God, okay. I see totally why they rejected it. But I could also see why they wanted more. Because in that messy, messy thing, there were some really interesting characters. And there were some really good scenes. There was something to this mess. It wasn't just like, this person has no idea what they're doing. It was like, this person knows what they're doing, but they need some more work. And this is why when self-publishing became so popular, I was like, oh, honey, no. Please don't do that to yourself because you're going to think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And you're going to put that baby out there. And 10 years from now, you're going to go, so, and I know I can say this because I would have done it. I was so convinced, but, with age comes wisdom, as they say. That's how I got into Ravenloft. And I answered this audition, and I did it. And so I got into writing in a really strange way. Pure happenstance. And I got into video games in the same way. Because I had done a couple of other gaming novels and had talked to some in the gaming world that did not materialize. These were not pleasant experiences. And I was like, I don't think I want to do this. But my editor that I with Star Trek called and said, hey, this is this company, it's named Blizzard. They have this game that they have decided is, they have really high standards and they don't think it's up to their standards, but they want the story to be told. And I was like, but I talked to a friend of mine. And he says, oh, you know, Blizzard's not like those other companies. Blizzard really cares about what they do. They have an interesting world. I think you'll enjoy working with them. And I'm like, well, okay. And, you know, it's love at first sight. I really just fell in love with the world. I got to shape a lot of it. A lot of it was formed during that writing. With Thrall's personality, the world of Azeroth, you know, I mean, the 2 moons, that was my idea. So I can say I hung the moon.
Oh, that's cool.
But it was just a fantastic experience. I worked directly with Chris Metzen. And it was 6 weeks to do this basic manuscript. And he was great. I mean, I'd be like, games and novels are very different mediums, just like movies and novels. You know, I mean, they have different needs and they have different limitations and different advantages. So I told him right from the outset, I can't just, you know, verbally animate this beat by beat. This has got to be a story like this. And it's like, totally cool. So, I mean, I'd be working, and I'd send out questions in the days I had them. And when his day ended, I'd get an email back and be like, okay, what color is orc blood? You know, 3 hours later, it's black green. And I'm like, no, blackish red. And I'm like, got it, let's go. You know, so, I mean, and by the end of it, I was like, this was great. This is a great experience. And Chris was like, wow, this is a great experience. The book did really, really well. And some years later, of course, the world of Warcraft came out. At this point, you know, Lord of the Clans came out before Warcraft 3 because it was an introduction to the character. And so, did I mention I never played video games and had zero interest in them?
I was going to ask that question when we got to that point, but yeah, did you never played video games?
Mm-mm. There's a funny story that makes me crack up and my friends crack up every time we think about it, was that shortly before all of this happened, my friend's partner wanted to upgrade his graphics card. And I have this old thing, and he's like, you want it? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And my friend says, oh, yeah, Christie doesn't play games. She just needs to type it. I'm like, I just need to type. Suddenly, you know, I'm working at all these video games. But my then spouse and I were visiting them for Christmas. And he says, oh, you wrote Thrall. Would you like to see Thrall? And I'm like, well, that'd be real cool. And so he logs in and he's playing Forsaken. And I'm like, what is this? You know, and I'm just kind of looking around. It's like, oh my God, so these are the Forsaken. I'm like, whoa, you know, and they're flying on the bat, you know, and coming here. And this is Orgrimmar. This is Orgrimmar. And he comes up and, you know, and they run up here and the drums, you know, I mean, and I'm just like, oh, this is amazing. And we run up and he says, have you come to serve the Horde? And got the blue eyes. And I'm just like, this is nuts. And if you've ever been around someone learning to drive, it's probably what I was like, learning how to maneuver the mouse. I was, whoa, all over the place. But I mean, you look up, there's sky. You look over, it's a world. It's a whole world. I am in Azeroth. And I'm like, tell me more. And, you know, so I was not really keen on like, oh, I don't want to, you know, slaughter everybody and fire guns, blah, blah, blah. And he says, you'd like the Tauren. And I'm like, oh, I bet I would. Let's try that. Let's go. And sure enough, one of the first quests, and I love that there's classic because this quest is back. And it was at this moment when my fate was sealed. One of the first quests was you have to go and find someone's mother at the well, their grandmother, because she went a while and she didn't come back. I'm like, oh no, she's probably been killed and I'll have to fight. And I go there and she's fine. She's just tired. And so you take her jug back for her. And I'm like, oh, I love this game. You help people. You know, so I sat on it for a while because I know myself. And if I get into something, I live there. And I was like, then I couldn't do it anymore. And so like in February of the next year, I got it. And next thing you know, I rolled a warlock which at the time was the hardest class to play in early vanilla WoW. My friends, of course, they're just joining with me too. We're all, know this, and I'm learning the ropes and I'm trying to figure this out. Next thing you know, I'm raiding, I'm 60, I'm leading my own little guild with my little friends and me, and I'm saying, all right, guys, we're getting to level 40. It means we're going to have to get our mounts, so we need to start, blah, 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 blah. And I called my agent and I said, I need to do more Warcraft novel because I got to justify all the time I'm spending.
Yeah, right.
And, so it's just been such it really opened my world. It opened me to an entire different way of telling stories. Subsequently, working on cinematics is, of course, another way to tell stories. And so that's kind of my journey, as traipsing through. But, so many things were just luck. And I've always believed that there are some things beyond your control. But the only thing you can control is how ready you are to jump if the opportunity comes. Are you prepared? Are you going to be able to say, yes, I can do that thing when it opens up? And so that's some other advice I would give to people is, opportunities may just come out of that's life. You may follow people say, tell me how to break into writing. And I'm like, well, answer an audition and win it. I mean, there's not too much I could do other than tell you the tried and true, because that's my wacky journey. So.
It seems every time I talk to somebody who got into writing novels specifically, that it's always a very different story every time. There is no single story for that. It blows my mind that you were writing and creating for the universe of Warcraft and you had never stepped inside of it. That's incredible. That's
one of the things I think that's one of my strengths personally is I love to love something. I love to be excited about it. I love to think about it and then just have my heart lift whenever I'm working on it. And I have an ear. I can catch dialogue. I can catch the intonations of a voice. And I can't explain how to do it. I just do. That's one part of the way my brain works. And so there have been a lot of properties that I knew nothing about. I knew nothing about Ravenloft. I knew D&D, but Ravenloft was brand new. I did Halo. I didn't know anything about Halo. I am not the biggest hard science fiction person. But what I can do is listen to people who love it and start pouring through the information that they send me. And it's kind of like, I describe it like there's a house and you want to get inside it, but you don't know which is the open door. So you just kind of keep circling the house and trying all the ones until you find the way in. And once I find the way in, I'm like, yay, I'm here. This is great. I'm excited to do this thing. And I think because it's such a genuine, I've been so lucky that I have not, through my career, been forced to work on something that I couldn't, enjoy to at least some level. Usually I would be like, oh, wow, a whole new thing to love. And so and the more you do it, the more you figure out what works for you, the quicker you can get to that place. So it's just been a lot of time and experience. Vampire of the Mists came out in 91. So I've been at this for a bit. And just, I counted it up and I've worked with like almost 24 different IPs.
wow.
And, it's just tell me about what you love and let me catch that love for you. And then I will do my thing and bring you stuff and we can all geek out together. So
That's cool. As someone who's worked with established IPs for so long, like 91, like you said, have you seen how the evolution of these game worlds have impacted storytelling in other media? I mean, obviously, there's a Warcraft movie, there's Halo TV show, there's Fallout TV show, there's obvious parallels, but how has it actually impacted the craft of storytelling back and forth? How has film influenced the game writing that you've developed, and how has the worlds of game writing impacted film, television, novels in a meaningful way?
I don't know. I mean, obviously it has, but I don't know. For me, I can't point to anything. all it seems to do to me is open the world up. Because you have, especially, you know what I'll tell you, the biggest thing is, and this may surprise you, in my experience, the audiobook has opened up a whole world for people who do not like to read, who have dyslexia, who don't have time. And when I started, this was a very rare thing. There were special companies, like, it was for the blind, and only certain books got it back in the day before it really, hit big. I'd only have one book, and it was heavily abridged. And it was sad because it was heavily abridged. It was one of my Star Trek books, and they had cut out all of the subplots, basically. And it was just the main storyline. And I'm like, but, so I'm not big into abridged. Unsurprisingly, I guess. But so I'd say that's the biggest one. We have so many ways to experience something. As you say, we have movies, we have audiobooks, we have radio drama, we have comics, we have graphic novels. Graphic novels are getting, they used to not, oh, that's for kids. And no, probably the biggest change is not so much the medium, but the people. Because when I started, there was a hierarchy, and it went from literary fiction to the genres mystery, romance, only for the ladies. Funny thing, romance authors are some of the toughest business people you will ever run across. They are so smart and so savvy. They're great. The reason romance does as well is because the people who are writing it know exactly what they're doing, and they work very hard. So love to all my romance writers, but it was not, considered literary fiction. And underneath that was science fiction, and then under that was fantasy. And under that were all media tie-ins of all sorts. Do you know there were like Kolchak tie-ins and Gunsmoke tie-ins and things like that. And then underneath that was science fiction media tie-ins. And then there were fantasy tie-ins. And then at the very, very bottom were gaming fantasy tie-ins. Very bottom. Rock bottom. And lo, how the worm has turned. So much more respect for these things. And that helps more people enjoy it. This is so mainstream now. Comics used to be this little niche for, the weird kid over there. And now everybody's like Marvel movies. And so the movies do help because they reach a brighter audience. And the fact that smaller things may have caught the eye of larger things like shows and movies. And we have more shows now. We have streaming channels that are putting out shows. We have so many more shows than like the big three networks, and your local. Mm-hmm. And so there's just the whole world, so many ways to get a story out there that it's really bringing everybody has a chance to be at the table. There will be something out there for everybody to enjoy in a format that they prefer.
Cool. I guess with all that work being done, Transmedia, to expand the universes, how do you see that impacting the game worlds in your experience? Like, after the movie came out, did that have an impact on World of Warcraft and the Warcraft lore? Like, do you feel it kind of goes both ways kind of thing?
I certainly think it brings it to the attention of people who would not do it. I'm really sad it didn't do better. Did huge in China. But, I'm not going to comment on any of that, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too.
My favorite part were the orcs. Oh my God. They did such a great job on that. That one where they throws a little pebble at them and Duritan giggles. But it certainly brought it to the forefront. We had ads during the Super Bowls. I mean, we had this new venue, this new format for people to be aware of it. And I was writing just tie-ins at the time. I wasn't working at Blizzard, so I'm really not privy to how that might have experience that.
Well, as a writer who has worked video games and novels, I guess a question I do like to ask of people in that position is, what were some of the unique challenges or opportunities or things you learned that were applicable from one art form to the other, and what were some of the big differences that made it really hard?
Well, the biggest difference was length. I am naturally a writer who writes lean. I am not the biggest fan of travel logs where you discuss the types of flowers that grow there and their, the history of the flowers and the mountains and the type of rock. I mean, no. Just give me characters, give me what they say, and give me a story. In fact, I had to teach myself how to write description because it wasn't easy for me. But as everyone wants the big fantasy novel because I guess a book is as good as many words as it has. Who knows? But anyway, people, when it's expensive, they want to feel like they've got something, and they want something that's going to take them time to get through. And I get that, actually. But I was always coming under. And in the second draft or the third draft, they'd be like, all right, can you tease out this subplot? Can we get it to this count? So then I started writing cinematics. And, I'd gone from, hey, can you make it a little bit longer? To, hey, can you make this a little bit shorter? I mean, this is great stuff, but can you have it? We've only got a minute.
Yeah.
And I'm like, So I had to learn. And, in writing a cinematic, you have a laundry list of things it has to do. It can't just be a cool thing for a cool thing's sake. It's got to inform the player about something. It's got to establish character. It's got to do this, X, Y, and Z. It's da-da-da. And the term I like to use is sing. I want to make something sing. And, I had to get all that nuts and bolts stuff down. And then I had the chance, to tinker with it a little bit. And was like, let's make it sing. So that was the main difference. And it was really nice because my strengths are dialogue and characters. So I was like, when you're writing, you're the entire production of the movie. You are the director, you are the actor, you are the writer, you are the costume designer, you have to do all of it.
Yeah.
And with our, with the cinematics team, you do this, and then they take it, and then they go do magic stuff somewhere, and then you get this incredible cinematic. So it's something you don't have to worry about. You don't have to. I got to make sure it's just. It's like, and I would give like little stage directions initially, and I worked with the wonderful Taryn Gregory, who really taught me so much. He was a great mentor. And he says, "No, the animators will get that." And I'm like, "Will they? Will they really? I'm the writer. Will they really?" Yes, they really will. And they will do it better than you could. You're just like, oh, that's so perfect. And then, of course, the voice actors come and they do their magic. So you don't have to do it all. And that's really kind of nice. And you just trust because you're working with a great team who know what they're doing. They know what they do as well as I know what I do. So I can just hand that over and go make your magic, guys. I didn't even want to see the cinematics generally as they went. I just wanted to be surprised by all the magic at the end.
That's cool.
So that's kind of the main differences that I found.
Nice. You hear again and again just how collaborative the art of making video games is, the process. And it sounds like you are one of those ones who lean right into it and enjoy the collaborative nature.
I do. And I think you have to do that to be any kind of media tie-in writer, because there are writers who it's theirs, from start to finish. Don't have my editor change a word. If my editor wants to give me feedback, I will decide if I wish to incorporate it, whatever. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. That's what you get to do when it's your book. Yay. But if you're working with media tie-ins, and I feel fortunate because my professional experience was in the media tie-in under tight deadline, which has served me well because I can write quickly. And you have to be willing, and you have to be, someone may say, well, we're deciding to do XYZ with this character instead of PDQ. And you're like, I have a lead time of a year. And you're writing for, it's like a bucking bronco, right? It's just a living thing. And it can change and change and change in the time that you have to stop working because it's got to go through the publishing process. So you just have to be available to, when they say, okay, you're going to need to jump. And I go, okay, how high and what am I reaching for? So, because that's your job. And your job is to do it with heart and do it with care and skill and give them the book, the owner of the IP, the book that they say, oh, this is great. This is exactly what we wanted. And hopefully give the readers, oh, great. This is exactly what we wanted, which is not always the case.
In that same vein, do you ever find that the constraints of sticking to a world's canon, like the established lore or what has to happen, has that ever impeded you, or do you find that constraint actually helps your creativity?
Both. It's a sword that really does cut both ways. The downside, of course, is you are locked in. If somebody says that your character is an identical twin, and you're like, God, that turned out to be a big mistake because now we have to do X, Y, or Z. So you're locked in. If it's out there, much more nowadays than before, because I think people were more just really to be like, hey, entertain me.
Mm-hmm.
And now with social media and the internet where you can research these things, people are very interested in the minutia. Mm-hmm. And, if you have a character who has green eyes and you give them brown, they will let you know. And I honestly think that getting the character right and telling a good story is more important, whether the eyes are blue or brown. Oh, they're going to come after me. But it's part of it. There's the fan base that is much more active, much more in touch. And so you do have to operate more than you would have 20 years ago within these parameters. And so you have like a game that was started years ago, and these characters got, and you're like, wow, they have all this history, all this lore. We were just having fun. We're making a game, and now it's this story, and these characters have gravitas, and they are important, and they're three-dimensional. And you might wish you hadn't done that because there are these other directions you could have taken them in had you not locked in here. On the other hand, if you have something there, that can be one of the best touchstones for creativity. I love going back over, a character's history, a line in a book, a throwaway scene in game from vanilla or, early on, and being able to go, yes. I did this with Star Trek. For my Voyager book, there was an episode called Eye of the Needle. And in that episode, Voyager discovers a wormhole. And they can communicate, and they have found a Romulan scientist. And he is a decent person. And he says, yes, I will get this information. We can't get you through. We can't get you home. But I will get this information to your families. And then it turns out it was not just a wormhole through physical space, but through time. Mm. And he actually had died many years ago. Yeah, so. And I was like, that's so cool. And it was one of the best early episodes. Many shows take time to find their feet. No, we know that. And Star Trek, to me, always, every single show always needed to find its footing. Once it did, you're off to the races. But this was like one of the really early ones. And I am like, this is incredibly good and interesting and moving. And when I started writing for Star Trek, I really wanted to explore that. So here's this one little thing in one episode in the early of 7 seasons of this show. But it grabbed me. And I was like, there's so much we can do there. Here's what we can do with them. And so we made a whole trilogy inspired by that one thing. And so people love that.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, I remember that was a good episode. Wow. So it really can serve you beautifully, or it can be both the exact same time too. It can serve you beautifully and you wish you hadn't done X, Y, or Z.
My follow-up question was going to be, how do you find the space to put your own touch or express your own creativity or your own vision and voice inside of those constraints? But it kind of sounds like you answered it for me with your anecdote about that Star Trek story, like just finding something that means something to you and then expanding and working with that.
Or looking at a little thing in the outline and deciding, let's do that. A couple of examples of that was in Lord of the Clans. The character of Taretha was not existent, but I knew that Thrall was going to have to work. Horde and Alliance were going to have to work together in Warcraft 3. I had that knowledge. And I said, well, he's raised as a gladiator. He's kidnapped as a kid. He's raised to fight. How in the world did he get from that to somebody who could work with humans? Right. And I said, we need an intermediary character. We need him to know that not all humans are bad. So that's how I created that character. And I had another one, but that's gone now.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that one. That was strong enough. Very, very, very cool. Well, I guess to tie this all together, at the end of the day, for narrative designers or people writing games or people writing novels or people writing comics or movies, what would be your advice from your experience in transmedia storytelling, whether it's about world building, character continuity, finding the thing that resonates with you? What is the key takeaway for you, Ben?
To just make sure I understand the question, people who are interested in doing what I do, what advice would I give them?
Yeah, basically in any of the various aspects, even if it's just somebody wants to just write novels or just be a narrative designer or just game writer, what's something we can take away from your amazing career so far? And there's lots yet to come, but what can you share?
I won't say that you don't start right. I did. But again, that was a weird experience. Generally, when publishers or game studios or whatever comic book publishers are looking for someone, they want somebody with a track record. They want somebody who has already published a book, who has proven that they can finish a book and that it's good. They can't just say, hey, I want to write Star Wars. Okay, kid, know nothing about you, but have a seat. It just doesn't work that way. They want somebody who can write tight, who can deal with criticism, who can pivot, who can do all of these. People do actually ask me this a lot. It's a great question. What's easier for you? What do you like more? What is easier? And easier is doing my own fiction. Because nobody's, like I said earlier, nobody's telling you what to do. So when you're writing media tie-ins, spoiler alert, people who write them are not hacks. They're some of the coolest, most professional people out there. They know exactly what they're doing, and most of them have their own stuff anyway. So let's dispel that one. But you have to do everything that you would do in a good novel, right? You have to have interesting characters, good dialogue, pacing, a plot, action, description. You got to have all of these things. And you have to do it with a character that's not yours, that has its own unique voice, not one you made up, that has great limitations on the sort of stories you can tell with them. And usually you have to tell the story that they already have in mind for you to tell. And in addition to all the other things. So the old joke, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, Ginger was the better dancer because she had to do everything Fred did except backwards and in high heels. And that's kind of what being a tie-in writer is like. So the first thing is work on your own craft, whatever it is. Please. I'm not even joking here. One of the saddest things is when I get an email from somebody who says that I've finished 100,000 word Star Wars novel. Where can I get it published? And I am like, they wouldn't even do that for me. If I presented them with a Star Wars novel, they'd be like, okay, maybe they would do it for someone who's already written Star Wars, but it's just not, that's not how that's the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
So work on your own stuff. Submit to magazines. There's still some magazines out there. We're very lucky. There's still some magazines that do fantasy and science fiction. Submit to that. Go to conventions for whatever, because oftentimes you'll get authors and or editors who are looking for new people, agents who are looking for new people, and it's a great place to meet them. Sometimes you are able to present to them for like 15 minutes. Both my agent and an editor that I worked with went to a convention. They both came home with 3 new clients. This is great. So go to like writing conferences, hone your craft. If, there are screenplay writing competitions that will at least motivate you to finish by a deadline. And that's good practice. So, I just realized this is like dating. They say, work on yourself first, right? Work on yourself first. Work on your skills. Be professional. Understand the field you're going into. Follow people on LinkedIn who are doing what you want to do, and participate. Don't hound them, but, if they have a really cool, here are my tips, you can say, oh, that's great. I never would have thought of that. Thank you. So if people are out there, they're okay with being involved. And don't abuse that. Don't abuse that, because people can just say, you know what, out. And that's cut off for everybody's access. But that's really it. Read in the field you love, or watch the thing you love, learn about it, learn who does what you do, and, read their work, follow them, and just be prepared. The only thing you can really do is be prepared for the opportunity when it comes. And, it can come anywhere, from an audition.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you. That's incredible. A lot of young writers, I hear this a lot, need to learn the business side. They need to understand the process. And it's changed over the years, from back when we used to send in manuscripts with, thumb screws through the binder and self-addressed stamped envelopes and all that. There's a completely different process now, but you need to know it. You need to understand how to get in that door, how to open the door, and how to take advantage of an open door instead of just throwing things through the window, over the transom, as they used to say.
And there's so many resources out there. There's a great one for fantasy, science fiction fantasy writers called Writer Beware. And they list agents that you should not be involved with. They have articles, they have all kinds of things. It's writerbeware.org. And so that's a really good place to start. But I had zero, and I was just out there, just making all of the mistakes, all of them. And, I just ran into people who had enough grace to look past the fumbling. And I feel very fortunate because of that. But you can avoid a lot of this stuff. And it's out there. Start researching and do it. If you want to write. Don't say, I want to write, I want to be a writer. Just be a writer. You can sit down right now and be a writer. Just write something.
There you go. Well, that brings us to the end of the core topic. I do have a philosophical question I like to ask everybody who comes on the show, regardless of what industry you come from. So I'm going to throw it at you and humor me for a minute here. In my opinion, there's this magical space at the intersection of obviously story and game, but also film, improv, acting, comic book writing, all of these wonderful storytelling art forms where we can all just get along. There's a shared fellowship. There's an instant feeling of camaraderie. If you agree with me about this, and not everybody does, but if you do, what do you think is the magical thread that holds a space like that together?
I'm going to say a sappy response.
I love them.
Love. Love for this thing. We love the stories about it. We love to play it. We love to be... You wouldn't play a game if you weren't interested in interacting with its world. And I love puzzle games as much as the next person, but I also really love a story. And people need people. And people need stories. We've been telling stories forever, ever. Except, cave paintings telling a story. We are storytellers at our heart. And for every storyteller around the fire, there are people who are listening to this story. And we're there because we love it. We're there because we love this game. We love the adventures. We love the story. We love the characters. We love our characters. And that would be it.
That's a fantastic answer. Love it. I love that the answer is love. Well, that's the hard stuff. Before we start heading for the door, I do like to open up a little space. Is there anything you want to promote, anything happening or coming up? Or conversely, where can people find you online if you want people to follow along on your journey?
Yeah, I am over on Blue Sky, and keeping it simple, it's Christie Golden at Blue Sky. And I do have a Facebook presence, but I'm not very available there. I'm trying to be more involved in LinkedIn. I'm looking for opportunities because I still want to tell stories. And my parents lived to 91 and 99, so I have a ways to go yet, and lots more storytelling ideas. And I also want to help people. It's good to be able to be on things like this and say, hey, don't do what Christie did. I've made the mistakes, so you don't have to. Please. Some people take the advice, some people don't, and that's their path to choose. But yeah, come hang out with me there. I'm going to try and get Kitten Ruff going back up, which was pictures of my cats, Anduin and Sylvanas, and portraying them as the actual characters with accompaniments, pictures, very silly stuff. But yeah, please say hello there.
Well, that's it. Thank you for putting up with me today. I guess as I push you out into the cold, I would love to give you the last word of the episode. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for us?
I can't remember the exact quote, but if I did, I would quote Sam Gamgee. It's the stories, Mr. Frodo. We, in this age of technology and science, I think we need imagination and story and the freedom to dream. And so I would just tell everybody, go out there, read, play, write, sing, do something creative. We're meant to be creative. Go out and do it, and go and tell your own stories.
Sadly, that's a wrap on another episode of the Corner of Story and Game. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please follow along on your platform of choice. Leave a review, a comment, and hey, come chat with us over on the Discord server. I know I've said it before, but we are just getting started with Season 3, and there's so much more to come. There's more guests lined up, more deep dives into the art and craft of game design and storytelling, and so much more to learn. So make sure to stick around, and hey, tell your friends. Until next time, keep telling stories, making those games, and building worlds worth getting lost in. Stay safe, Wanderer. Your chair will be ready by the fire the next time you stop in at the Corner of Story and Game.